Hello, everybody. Lehman Crafton Jr., aka Zorval Chan Less Than Guru, and today we are doing day 15 of the 31-day character creation challenge. So, right around halfway. Tomorrow will be over halfway, and we will be doing Palladium role playing game, the first edition. Basically, as you can see, this is a well worn game. I loved it to death for the first part of my role playing life, basically. And it lasted that way probably until, I guess I want to say until mid 90s when second edition Palladium came out. I tried playing that. I didn't like it as well as I liked the original system. And since then, I've done it maybe once or twice with some modified rules. And I'm getting ready to do a new campaign based off of the core rules with my own changes with certain things like uh, the way armor takes damage, the way damage is done, and spells are cast. So it's going to be a very home-brewed, house-ruled game, but um, for today, we'll just be doing the game. Pretty much try to do it straight out of the books. As I mentioned before, Palladium uh, is based off of the AD in first edition, and a lot of things aren't written or are more ambiguous in the rules. And sometimes you bring in assumptions and things that you've learned from AD&D first edition or basic edition into Palladium role playing gaming. You don't even realize that you're doing it. So let's go ahead and Mars is again trying to get into the middle of everything. So there's lots of different races that you can play. And they kind of have a nice scale up here, so you can see all the different races and kind of how they are in scale to each other. I know a lot of modern games do this, but this is one of the first original games that I saw that you could actually kind of see what all the races were, and then they kind of did the shadow of it, and you can see Mars is trying to be annoying, and they list everything out there. Mars, your claws are sharp. Doesn't matter how much attention I pay to this cat. As soon as I get on a camera and start recording, he just decides that is his time to go crazy. Let's see. Here's the basic part. All the attributes for Palladium are listed here. A lot of them are similar to D&D or have a D&D equivalent. Like IQ is like intelligence, and ME, mental endurance. That's kind of uh, sort of like wisdom. Mental affinities, sort of like charisma. Physical strength is strength. Physical prowess is like dexterity. Physical endurance is like constitution. Physical beauty is kind of its own thing. It's not really charisma. That's more of the mental affinity. And then instead of being speed based off of dexterity or something like that, there's an actual speed attribute. And then here kind of does lifespans, and then any type of they call character classes OCCs, occupational character classes. They kind of make it's your job. So they give size and height, if there's any night vision. Can they get psionics? Because you can randomly get psionics. And then if there's any restrictions, what they can tend to be. There are a lot of in lore restrictions, like the dwarves in the Palladium world. Uh, they had a big fight against elves, and unleash terrible. Both sides kind of unleashed terrible magics, but the dwarves kind of decided never to do magic again. So you can't be a dwarf mage, and that's something that if you want to separate the Palladium setting from the Palladium rules, that would be something that you would need to go through all of these and determine, are they based on lore or is it based on some other racial reason? And another thing that I think is kind of humorous, and it sort of makes sense but doesn't make sense, is like small classes can't be longbowmen because you're like, you can't make a longbow, but they specifically have uh, rules for how small weapons and large weapons work. So I don't see why you couldn't be a small character race that was a longbowman. You just it's a longbow for you and your race and other small races, but it's not a big longbow, like just like a large, say you have a wolfen, uh, big 7 to 9 foot tall, wolf-like humanoid that has no restrictions. Well, their longbow is bigger than a human's longbow. So is that a different type of bow? That type of thing. But a lot of it is just the author's thoughts. Sometimes it's random, but again, we will try to get through everything. So I'm going to be a human. Basically, if you want to be a certain OCC, you can look. They have a chart in the beginning here. Occupational character classes. They list all of them and their requirements. So if you want to be a certain OCC, you can look at what the requirements are and then look at the race and see which one might give you the best, because unlike D&D, all the races don't roll 3d6 and then adjust in some way. I'll get closer so you can see. They do different amounts of six-sided dice. So sometimes you're only rolling a 2, but sometimes you're rolling a 4. And there's a few, I believe, that have a 5, like a changeling ME mental endurance is a 5, and I believe the troll PS is a 5. So uh, it's not like you can shift around stats attributes because you're rolling different amounts of dice. But the humans are all 3d6, so I figured that would be easy. Kind of just do again, go down the line, old school style. So we're rolling for IQ first. So that is a 9. ME would be a 10. MA 6. Not very likable. PS is a 9. Oh, another 6 for PP. Oh, the first one above 10 is a 13. That's Constitution, PE, physical endurance. And I'm actually not too bad looking. I got a 12. And then speed is 11. Okay. So kind of middle of the range with one halfway decent and a couple of pretty low stats. Now, a thing you will notice is on the attribute bonus chart, 16, you need to get any type of bonus for anything. And that 16 is nothing I got. My highest was a 13, but you notice there's nothing lower. So if you get anything lower, it doesn't have a negative. So it's just more of a role playing tool to determine what you might how to role play your character. Like my character is not doesn't have a high mental affinity, so I might say the wrong thing at the wrong time or have bad manners or something like that. My physical prowess isn't, even though it's a 6 and really low, it's not something that will um, hurt me, but I can act clumsy and do things like that. Again, come on. Okay, sorry about that, but here we go with all the attributes. Um, so I am a human. I did get that. With my physical endurance being pretty good, um, nothing gives me bonuses. So frankly, as long as I can be something that is uh, that I have the attribute requirements for, I could basically be it. There is a lot of optional things that you can do, like birth order and weight and age to figure out social background, disposition, racial and personal hostilities, land of origin. All of this is stuff that, um, if you like doing random things, it can be fun. None of it actually means anything except for the social backgrounds. Those might give bonuses to skills if the game master allows it. But since it's pretty much optional, I'm not going to do it. There's things for insanities and things like that. Basically, if you die and come back, you probably get an insanity. Some random insanity happens. Um, Palladium is a system that has alignments. As much as a lot of their rules and stuff are kind of ambiguous and not very well defined, in my opinion, the one like rule of all Palladium games that is like the rule that cannot be broken apparently is all players have to choose an alignment, and there is no such thing as neutral. Basically, there are two selfish alignments, one kind of being a thiefy type and one kind of being a, say, uh, Han Solo, like wants to be a rogue but ends up doing the good thing type alignment. So they have principled, which is kind of your lawful good, scrupulous, that's more of chaotic good. The two selfish alignments are unprincipled. That might be more of like lawful neutral, if you want to look at it that way. Anarchist is more chaotic neutral, and then miscreant would be more neutral evil. Aberrant lawful evil. They keep their word, and they might do bad things, but only if they need to. They don't just go around killing people for fun, things like that. And then your diabolic is basically your chaotic evil. They just kill whenever they want, or things like that. So let's go ahead and let's look at our occupational character classes. Once I determine what I will be, then I will probably pick an alignment based off of that. So I could be a mercenary fighter, and I might take that because that is an easy um, or an easier class to do. Palladium goes in the old school mentality of combat is battle, not sport. If you're not smart, you die. But you take a lot of time to make a character. You have to choose a lot of skills and things like that. And this was like their first, I won't say first real game, but the game that Kevin Simbita wanted to publish. He did Mechanoids before this to kind of make it so that he was able to publish this. But even back here, it took a while to make a character, and then it even gets more involved for later games. Mars got mad because I didn't like him up here, so now he's making noises in the background, playing with a dice holder. So forgive the noise, but at least he's not up here messing with my character making. um, you could also, if, and it wasn't even like PP to be a peasant farmer, but you need that also to be, I think, to be a thief. No, thief needs a PP of 9. So if you don't have the PS of the 7, you could be uh, a peasant. But if you didn't have anything, at least an IQ of a 7, a PP of a 7, a IQ of a 7, or a PS of a 7, if you had other ones, you couldn't be anything. So that is amusing that they didn't put any fail safe, and at least in like D&D Basic and some of the older ones that I was showing when I was reading through, it was kind of like, if you don't get this, pretty much toss the character. There's no rule in here, and that's one of those that you have to take that assumption from D&D and put it in here. If you didn't have something that at least had an IQ of 5, which is possible because there are some things that you could roll an IQ of a 2 or a 3, and you wouldn't even be allowed to be a witch, and they're witch or devil worshippers. They're not Wiccan witches. So let's go ahead and pick mercenary fighter. Fighter. I'm a human. I put that in the wrong thing. Uh, I'll name him Trallic. Palladium has a true name thing here, where you normally go by a different name than what your true name is, because if somebody finds out your true name, they can do nasty magical spells and stuff against you. So that is a thing. Um, let's just make him anarchist. He's a mercenary fighter. He will fight where he needs to fight. He doesn't really care about what causes there are. Basically, if he's paid, he will do the job. So here's a whole thing of skills. Skills are percentile based. The combat and everything is the D&D based, where it's a D20, and then the damages for like long swords are D8s and short swords are D6s, etc., like that. But the skills are percentile based. So here's the mercenary fighter. And basically, if we just look, we needed the PS of 7, and I have a 9. So again, a 7 doesn't give you any negatives or bonuses, and neither does a 9. It kind of might seem low, but it's enough to be a mercenary fighter. So I get here, let's see if I can go down. I automatically get all the OCC skills. And then elective skills, there is a list that starts here and it goes down and then it goes up to here. And I get to choose 6 of those at level 1. And then when I make level 3, I get to choose 3 more. Those begin at level 1. And then at level 8, I get 3 more, which begin at level 1. And then at level 12, I get 3 more that begin at level 1. And it's similar in secondary, but secondary only gives the skills that you give a bonus to. So secondary skills can be, there's a list of them, and they can be taken by anyone, but these are the ones that actually give bonuses. Now, if it's not in the elective skill list, though, I cannot take it. So that's something to, if you're a new person to Palladium, you need to kind of be aware of. So the skills that the OCC skills that I automatically get are hand-to-hand mercenary. So I have a OCC skill list here. All right, hand-to-hand mercenary. And that is one of the things that I actually really liked about Palladium First Edition. It's the only system that I know of, unless there's some weird system or different system that I'm not aware of, that each of the men-at-arms types character classes had their own combat style, basically. And as they went up levels, they got different things. They normally would end up with, say, 5 attacks, up to 5 attacks per round, but between that, they would get different things. So, like at second level, one might get a +1 to damage, and one might get a +1 to strike, and another one might get a +1 to dodge. And then at third level, one of them might get 2 attacks, and another one get a +2 to damage. So, depending on what you got a different style of hand to hand. I like that a lot. All the Palladium games after this basically broke it down into hand to hand basic, hand to hand expert, martial arts, and sometimes assassins. And that was it. So there wasn't that what I considered kind of a cool thing to split up the different men at arms having their own unique hand to hand form. Certain ones also, like certain priests, might be studied and get like thief or assassin or something else, mercenary fighter. But most of mages and any type of spellcasters could get one called non hand to hand combat non men at arms, and the progression wasn't quite as good, but it still allowed them to participate in the combat. So you could have a wizard swinging a sword. Now, if he was up close and needing to swing his sword or his staff or dagger, he probably was not casting spells because this was old school where you had like a 95% chance of not being able to cast spell once you got engaged in melee. So magic users would want to stay back, but if they didn't, they could go forward. So that was one thing. So I just wanted to mention that with the hand-to-hand mercenary, and then there's a whole thing about combat skills hand-to-hand. So that would be mercenary fighter. And then I also get a weapon proficiency small shield. I can write that here as well. And then and scale walls. And the scale walls is at a plus 10%. So whatever the chart shows me, I will add 10% to that. Palladium doesn't have skills based off of stats except for intelligence. If you have an intelligence that's 16 or higher, you get a bonus to any skill that is percentile based. Weapons are not percentile based, but any other skill is. So that is something interesting and uh, not really similar to what any other games out there do. So I get 6 elective skills. So one of them I want to be a sword. Um, I mean, I could pick a blunt or battle axe or things like that, but let me just pick. I can use a small shield, so um, let large swords. I think long swords are considered large swords, so I'll pick that now. And if it's not, I'll change it to a short sword. But you could pick a lot, so I could pick, say, a short bow also. And then, um, let's see, horsemanship might come in handy. General. There were 3 types of horsemanships. Um, there is general, there is a knight, and then there's a paladin. So knights are better than general, and paladins are better than knights. And in Palladium, paladins are not the magic divine like religious warrior. They're basically just better knights. They don't have any special abilities in first edition. Medical can always come in handy when you're living by the sword. Prowl, and that one I actually would get a plus 5%. And let's do identify tracks. I also get a plus 5%. And then I would get 8 skills that are secondary. So if I look at these that I get bonuses for, and I try to figure out what I might want to use as part of my 8 skills, a sense of direction, that makes a lot of sense. That's at a plus 5. Um, swim. Never know when you might be forced to swim. Recognize weapon quality is a plus 6%. And they do kind of, not everything advances in fives and tens. You can get plus 2% or plus 3%, 4%, 6%, etc. So I'll do those three, and then I want to take a look at the secondary skill list. So if I go back, I believe, okay, these are the elective skills, and again, these are the only ones of those that I can get are the ones that were on that list. But there should be here's a secondary skill list. And anything here I can choose. So I chose 3 that give me bonuses, and then I get to choose 5 more. When you're a mercenary, it no matter how bad it might seem, cooking is something that might be useful. And I do specifically remember cooking doesn't mean that if you fail that you get sick or anything. It just means it doesn't taste good. I remember having that be brought up a few times. It might be hard to swallow to get down, but preserve food might be handy. Tailor. Don't know when I might need to fix my own clothes. Let's go sailing. Maybe sometimes he works as a marine guarding. I got swim, so I'll take sailor. And then that's anything. Oh, that's it. Um, yeah, I think it's funny that there's like things that I would probably think of that aren't on this list, but there are things like both intimidate or yeah, sorry, imitate voices and ventriloquism. So that I think is kind of funny, and they have a lot of redundant skills, but then they have other skills that you're like, why don't they have? And things like that. And that's one of the things that when you start getting a system that has tons and tons of skills, you start splitting hairs on what's one skill and what's another skill and where do they overlap and things like that. So this was a game again. The beginning I loved that you could get all these skills and stuff, but the more I play, the more I think a tighter uh, range of skills. And I'll do carpentry. So if I go back to the elective skills, the first thing that they have is they have disguise, forgery, and dousing, and I don't think I had any of those. So then I can look at my hand-to-hand, and hand-to-hand mercenary is a +1 to damage. So I can put a +1 to damage. So any of my weapons that I have, I'm going to do a damage. I start off with 1 attack, and here's what I was saying, the soldier is also +1 damage, but at second level, the soldier gets 2 attacks, and the mercenary gets +2 to parry and dodge. And then at third level, he gets 2 attacks, and the soldier gets +3 to parry and dodge, and then 2 to damage also. So things go up a little different. Now, the soldier does have higher requirements, and usually uh, the ones with higher requirements usually get a better full range, but it does give it to everybody. And then the non-men at arms, theirs is lowest, but again, they're not, their character OCC, their occupational character class, isn't one designed for melee combat. Here's the horsemanship. So the general, I get riding, care, and feeding. Do I have? I can just kind of look, identify tracks. Is that something like that? Yes. So the identified tracks is a 20/5. And so I would have a 25% chance or a 10% chance. And when you read the skills descriptions, it tells you what the first one means and the second one. And so let me actually go back there just so that you can see what it might mean. Identify, that's plants, so tracks would probably be the next one. Yeah. Oh, identify tracks. This skill enables a person to become fluent in the study and identification of both animal and humanoid tracks. The first percentile number is the ability to successfully recognize the tracks and animal that made them, and the second is to recognize false trails or tracks. So I would have, at first level, a 25% chance, which is a quarter of my rolls, percentile rolls, to actually point at tracks and say that's from this animal, and even less to notice if it was a false trail. So that is one of the things with Palladium. When you're first level characters, you have a very difficult time of doing things that you picked to do. And that's another thing that I think is kind of it doesn't appeal to me as it used to. When I was young, I just accepted it, and now I'm like, I wish you could actually do it. I'm not saying that you should always do it every time, but something besides a 25% chance when that is an elective skill makes sense to me. So let's go on. So that was identify tracks. Medical is 2832. Again, and I think one might be to diagnose and the other to treat, maybe. 2832. Again, pretty low. Picklock, prowl. I picked prowl, and I got a 5% to that, so that's an 18%. So I would have a 23% chance of prowling. Scale walls was one of those that I actually got a plus 10%, so plus this 26 means that I have a 36. And you always, on this, the basic character sheet that came with first edition, the one thing I wish they would have did was have a like a bonus and then the percent and then the total, because if I have this 10, I have to remember I haven't added it to this number, and I don't add it to that number because every level I have to look on the chart again to find out what I have. So it's easier for me to just add them together. But if I had room, maybe I'd blow this up a little bit more on the page. So I got that one. Horsemanship I got. So I got all of my electives except for the weapons. And the weapons are kind of similar to the hand-to-hand chart where you get various pluses to strike, parry, or throw on different things. So my small shield, I look at my shield up here, is a +1 to parry. So I can add my +1 to parry there. And it's interesting because I think when they were doing layout, they forgot shields. So then they had the space here so that they could write how often you needed to replace your shield, because armor actually has points, kind of like people have hit points. Armor has structural damage capacity points, SDC. So people have hit points in first edition, and objects have SDC. And they listed it for the armor, but they didn't list it for the shield. So people asked about the shield. So by the time they got to this printing, they kind of inserted here, and also ranges for some of the missile type weapons. Um, so the large sword is a +1 to strike. So I can put that there. +1, 2. I put it there. It's a +1. It's just blurry. Now here's something that wasn't, and it's not explained well, but bows. I got the short bow, and you'll see it has this R1, and the sling has R2. That is rate of fire. So the question is what happens when you try to shoot a bow or sling with 2 and then stab with your sword? Can you do that? You have 2 as a rate of fire. Can I do 1 and then another 1 for here? Or since I only get 1 attack here, what about my rate of fire? And that's why I think the logical conclusion is at the beginning of the round, you determine, am I going to swing swords and use melee? Am I going to use ranged weapons and do missile fire? Magic combat has its own thing, or I'm going to do magic combat, and then throwing is in a different book, and it talks about how many you can throw. Before that, I would assume that it was your number of attacks here, because thrown objects aren't considered missile weapons. They don't have a rate of fire. As you can see, a throwing axe here does not have any type of rate of fire. So I would assume that it was your number of attacks, but later they have a juggling skill called juggling, and you can throw multiples. So that's why when I play, from now on, basically, as a game master, I say there's 4 stances. And at the beginning, you tell me what stance you're in. Are you in a melee combat stance? Are you in a ranged stance? Are you in a magic stance? Are you in a throwing stance? And then if something happens to change that, like you're in a mage casting stance and you go to cast a spell and suddenly somebody engages you in melee, you don't get your second spell. You don't get any hand-to-hand you get because you're having to switch stances, because otherwise you're going to have to every time make up an individual ruling for it, and it just takes a lot longer. So now we can go, because I got all my elective skills, I can go to the secondary skill list. And this is another thing that's different than later Palladium releases. Later Palladium releases, instead of it having a chart that you go down and figure out, it's basically, it tells you a percent to add per level. So it might say +4 per level. So every time you get a level, you automatically add 4. Where here, it can be different. As you can see here, for this recognized weapon quality, you start with a 10, you gain 10, you gain 10, you gain 8, you gain 10, you gain 7, you gain 5, 5, 5, 5, and then 5, and then 3 and 3. So it's kind of a, doesn't have any type of rhyme or reason besides when Kevin Simbita was writing this, this is what he put down. But that was that weapon quality, which I have. So that was a 10. So I get a 20% because that was one of my bonuses. So I actually have a 30. Oh no, I have a 6%. So I have a 16. Sorry, I couldn't read my own writing for that. Let's go. I remember I took carpentry, so that's 16%. Cook is 10%. Again, it's good that that is not to make it to where it makes you sick or not nourishing you. It only makes it so that it tastes bad and is hard to get down, maybe a little hard to digest, but not to give you, because if I'm working with the 10% and cook, if that meant the food was bad, that meant that all first level characters would be dying very fast just from food. Since I mean, until you need to get to level 4 before you even have a half chance, but so at least it goes up quite a bit. It's not. It gets up to 100% at 11 level, so it's not as bad as it's probably one of the most progressive in points. Dance Demon is very paint. Preserve food. I remember I took that. So that's 24%. Sailing is 21. Since the direction is 35, that's when I had a +5 on, so I actually have 40%, which is probably one of the highest skills that I have. So that's 40%. Um, swim is 25. So I actually got a 30 for that. And then I need Tailor. Tailor is a 20%. So I got all my skills. So now, um, and I actually will say I like this part about Palladium. You look, if I can find it, that's the one downside is finding where it's listed, because it's not listed. If I remember correctly, it's listed right before skills, not by gear. But basically, if you're a man of magic, you start with this. If you're a type of clergy, you start with this. And if you're optional, you start with here. And man at arms, you start with here. And basically, it doesn't give you like X many, 3D 6 times 10, to where some people get a lot and some people get a little gold. Basically, everybody of that type of character class gets the same thing. So, men at arms, you get clothes, boots, belt, a large sack, a small sack, one low quality weapon of any type. One low quality means is it doesn't mean that it's like bad in any way. It's just that they have high quality weapons made by kobolds and dwarves, which give bonuses. So basically, it's just saying choose a weapon, not a kobold or dwarf weapon, and then amount of gold if you want to buy more or just keep is 120 gold. So I can put that over my equipment here. So I'll write that kind of off screen. But I get clothes, boots, a belt, a large sack, small sack. I'll pick a weapon, and then um, I guess. Oh, there actually is a place for gold and gems here, gold and or jewels. So 120. So I'll see if I can buy some armor with that 120. So um, some people got confused when I was getting ready to do a system based off of that. Basically, they list all the OCCs for men at arms, and then they talk about combat, and then they get into weapons and gear, and then after that they do magic OCCs, and then they go to magic spells. So it's kind of broken apart. In some way it makes sense, but in another way, if you expect all the OCCs to be all together, they're not. So you do have to kind of look at that. So I'm looking at armor here, and if I just look at things, I have 120. So basically, the most I can get, because hard leather is 150, is soft leather. So soft leather is 75. So that would leave me with 55 gold, but I can get soft leather armor. Start off with. So here is the armor rating. If I go across for, am I going to be able to? Okay, let me try to start from the top because every time I go from the bottom, I found out it blocks things. So if I look at soft leather, full suit, that's 1, 2, 3. So 1, 2, 3. It starts off with an armor rating of 9, an SDC of 20 and 8 pounds. So armor rating of 9, 20 SDC, and 8 pounds. And the cost was 75 in case I need. Now, here is the thing with Palladium. 20 SDC means when this armor takes damage, damage is done to the SDC instead of me. If the SDC is reduced to 0, then I take damage. Which that part of it makes sense to me. The armor rating is like your armor class in the modern D&D world, where the higher is better. So anything under a 4 will miss. Anything from 5 to 9 hits my armor. Anything above 9, so a 10 above, would hit me. But I haven't calculated my hit points yet. My hit points are my PE of 13 and then a D6. So let me go ahead and do that. So a 2. So 2 and 13 is already 15 hit points. So me, myself, at 15 hit points, is almost as much as my armor at 20. In a level, I roll, if I get up to second level, I roll another d6. If I would roll a 5 or 6, I would have as much as my armor. And after that, I would have more than my armor. And when there's magic potions and priests that can heal and stuff like that, there gets to be a point when even if you look at higher armor, like let's just look at even plate, full suit is 160. Is 160 SDC. That's not going to last very long. And there is a point that I've always come across where people rather get hit themselves than their armor to get hit because their armor is going to be damaged and they'll have to find a smith to repair it, or they will have to repair it themselves. And healing magic will heal themselves. So that's why I have made different rules for the armor. And another problem is that armor in future games where people also have SDC, not just items, they have hundreds of SDC more than armor. There's no point in armor in a lot of the Palladium games. But that's just a little advice that if you're doing that, they do have rules to add SDC to armor, but it costs more money and it takes time, and you can only add a certain amount to it. So even with those rules, for me, it doesn't do very well. So let's look at the swords. I think they're on the next page here. So large swords can be, some of them don't have to be two-handed. So they have a large sword and a broadsword. So I'm going to take the long sword. So the long sword, and these are just how long they are, how much they weigh, but this is a 1d8 plus 2 for damage. The 1d8 plus 2. And as you'll see, there is a lot of 1d8s, 2d6s, 3d6s for a very big sword. So it's a little bit more than D&D weapons, but it's not terribly off. So that's why I say it's not that big of a problem. Now with my mercenary fighter, I had a +1 to damage, so that means if I use my longsword, I do 1d8 plus 3. And then at some point, I'll probably get some strikes based off of my hand to hand, but right now I have a +1 for my large sword. So when I roll a d20, I'll add 1 to it. Again, if somebody's attacking me, I can try to parry. I can use my one attack. If I have not gone, if they try to hit me, I can roll a d20, add 1 to it with my shield, and if I, in the future I would get a plus to parry with my hand-to-hand mercenary fighter, I can add those together. I add that to my d20. If I equal or beat that number that was rolled against me, I parry it. So if I'm going to get hit, then I might want to try to get parried and not take points off my hit points. So there is active defenses, which is a thing that is pretty interesting and one of the things that I kind of liked. But it does normally takes your attack. I actually believe mercenary fighters and men at arms, it doesn't take their attack. They get what's called an automatic parry. As long as they're aware that they're being attacked, they can try to. But that would be something I'd have to reread up on in the rules. But you get active parries, which I find interesting. So everything else is just fluff, and everything that's needed for the character is here. So I will go ahead and I will end this character creation challenge day 15. And again, it was the Palladium first edition. There's a nice core part to this. This is something that I think you could play, but things might not make sense if you just try to play it right out of the book. But it is a good system if you like to take the base and change things how you want to. I like the active defense aspect of it. I like the idea that your weapons and your training uh, add together. I like the idea of weapon or armor taking damage, so you're not wearing the same suit of armor through the whole thing unless it happens to be magical. But I would advise to look at that rule and change it. The rule that I'm going to be using is for every 10 points of damage, round down. So sometimes it might be no damage. You'll take a point of SDC. So say that the say I have two of these mercenary fighters fighting each other. This 1d8 plus 3. If I hit the armor and it did less than 10 points, it wouldn't hurt the armor. If it did more than 10 points, the maximum it could do is 8 plus 3, so that would be 11, would be 1 point to the armor. So the armor would be reduced after a while, but it's not the 2 or 3 hits, and then it's nothing, and now you got to buy new armor at 75 gold, where you could just, the priest of the party could heal you up normally. But like I said, I believe Palladium first edition, I like it better than second edition, but I don't think it's a perfect system, but I think it's a good framework uh, to kind of make it your own. So I'll go ahead and I'll end this here. If you like the video, you can hit like. If you dislike, you can hit dislike. Subscribe if you want to keep tabs on my videos. I'll probably, until this character creation is done, I'll probably do less actual videos. I might do one today, but these take a long time. I mean, I'm up to almost 55 minutes by the time I in talking. It's an hour to just record, and then to put it through my video editor to get the front splash screen on, and then upload it to YouTube. It takes around 2 hours to do. So until I get to the end of this, my videos might be a little more sparse, but I will be. I'm going to do my best to get through this challenge. So once again, I am Lehman Crafton Jr., aka Zorvalachan Less Than Guru. 15th day of the 31-day character creation challenge, Palladium role-playing game, first edition. I will catch you later.